Welcome to another rant and review, and this time around it is of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Now, this particular film, to me personally, is the final death blow, the final curb stomp to this suffering franchise. I don't even think the 2018 film did anything to make this franchise recover from the ass pounding that Rob Zombie administered to this franchise with this particular installment. Rob Zombie once again returns to direct, and just like his effort in the previous film that he did, the remake, he didn't want to do this. He had no desire to do a Halloween 2 until the money was right, and Malek Akkad gave him the green light to fuck this franchise in the ass in any way or any form that he wanted to. And this is the end result. This is what happens when you let someone fuck a franchise in the ass every which way but loose. Now, I will give Rob Zombie this. His direction in this film is not terrible. It's not nearly as atrocious as his writing is, but it's not saying much. At best, his direction in this film is average. It's a mediocre job when it comes to his direction. He sets up his shots decently enough. He knows his way around a camera when it comes to zooms and pans and establishing shots and various other camera techniques. But he has a tendency to overdo certain things. For instance, there are too many shots in this film that are littered with shaky cam that do nothing to really add to the effectiveness of the sequence. And on top of that, he also has other shots that are shot in ways that are so fucking dark you can't see shit. So, in the scenes that are intended to be a little bit more atmospheric or moody or violent, the lighting is so dark you can't see anything, so it doesn't really have the full impact that it might have had otherwise if Rob Zombie's direction was better. Now, I watched the theatrical cut because I decided to avoid the director's cut because I had read about it, I had heard about it, I knew there were more scenes of Laurie being a total bitch, and this film I knew was going to be bad enough as it is. I did not want to suffer any more than I already had to. So I did not watch the director's cut. I just stuck with the theatrical cut. And from what I've heard, the theatrical cut is an improvement in some areas, but it still suffers from the same crippling flaws as the director's cut. Because at the end of the day, it's the same fucking story. It's the same flawed take on this franchise and on these characters, with just a few extra scenes of dialogue, and the ending is a little different. Now, this screenplay, it is something unbelievably bad in so many different areas. Once again, Rob Zombie is injecting his white trash into this franchise. It has no place here. It doesn't fit, and it just makes you want to throw up because it's such a sickening and shitty mix of ingredients that are just slopped into this franchise. And you have, admittedly, some alright concepts, like for instance, showcasing the aftermath of what happens to a victim in a slasher movie, dealing with their PTSD, and dealing with how being a survivor of a slasher film affects someone psychologically. That's something I will give Rob Zombie credit for. I don't think he does that much with it. I think ultimately this could have been something that really could have been great if it had somebody else who was writing it who actually knows what the fuck they're doing. But with Rob Zombie, you have a total amateur dealing with these big potential themes for a slasher film, and he just fucks it up. Now, you also have some potential that's wasted in the hospital sequence. The hospital sequence, it was well shot, it had its moments of tension, and it was brutal, it was intense. It was essentially just another take on the hospital massacre and the chase from the majority of Rick Rosenthal's Halloween 2, but this time around, it's not real. Once the twist is revealed that it's just a dream, then that whole sequence has no impact whatsoever because it never really happened. And yes, I know. If the film was just taking place in a hospital and was just doing the same story as Rick Rosenthal's Halloween 2 from 1981, that would be equally as problematic as what Rob Zombie ultimately chose to do with this story, with this sequel. But I mean, you didn't need to have it be a dream. It could have still have happened, but she survived and then Michael escaped. And she doesn't know where he is and he's been missing for a long time. You could have easily done something like that. You still could have made it actually an event that happened without completely turning it into nothing but a delusion from Laurie's mind. Now, speaking of delusions from Laurie's mind, I had to go on a quick little rant here because there are people who defend this movie saying that Michael Myers wasn't real. He was just a figment of her imagination in this film, and Laurie was the one that was killing everybody, or the sequences when Michael was killing people in the film, it was all a delusion by Laurie. And I call bullshit on all of that. I think the people who feel that way need to put down the fucking bong and watch the film when they're not high as a fucking kite and actually see what is happening on the screen. Because there's numerous scenes in this film that completely contradict that theory. For instance, in the climax, Brad Dourif's character, Sheriff Brackett, has what is clearly Michael Myers in his sights with his sniper rifle, and he clearly shoots him. So, unless Sheriff Brackett is also having delusions of his own, and if that's the case, it makes no fucking sense why he would do that. This whole theory is completely blown up by that insertion of that sequence. Also, these other kills, these other moments in the film, like there's another scene where Laurie, she ends up in a crash and Michael rolls her car into a ditch. What are you trying to tell me? That, oh, it was never delusion of hers? That she drove the car into a ditch? Did she hallucinate the guy who picked her up? And his death, did she kill him too? So there's a lot of things that don't make any sense when you try to use that theory and put it up to any amount of scrutiny. So no, I don't buy that. It's a bunch of bullshit and it stinks. Now, going back to the film, most of the movie takes place 2 years after Michael Myers survived getting shot 6 times and shot in the fucking head. Because apparently, despite the fact that this is a Michael Myers who's not supposed to be supernatural, he's supposed to be a normal human being, he somehow survived 6 shots and a shot to the fucking head that would kill any normal person. But okay. Alright, you somehow survived. And on top of that, Loomis also survives. How? Michael Myers crushed his fucking head in the remake. He grabbed his head and he crushed it and you saw blood coming out of his eyes. How did Loomis survive? That doesn't make any sense either. So, Loomis somehow survives. Michael Myers somehow survives. We have this scene that is so fucking cringe-inducing, just chock full of Rob Zombie's white trash bullshit, with this duo of coroners who have Michael Myers in the back of their van, and they're talking about fucking corpses, which I thought was kind of ironic because that's essentially what Rob Zombie is doing with this film. He is fucking the corpse of this franchise in the ass repeatedly over and over again throughout the running time of this movie. So you have these two corners, they're talking about fucking a corpse. A cow shows up in the middle of the fucking road. You even have such on the nose stuff like cow, and then they hit a fucking cow, and Richard Brake is one of the coroners, and he gets thrown through the window, and he's lying on the ground, and for some reason Rob Zombie decides to have this uncomfortably long, cringe inducing sequence where Richard Brake is just sitting there broken, and he's going, fuck, 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 fuck. And you're just like, yeah, I feel you. I don't like this fucking movie either. It's painful. It's physically painful to sit through. But get on with it already. And then Michael Myers shows up. He kills them. I think he cuts off one of the guy's head. Like he takes a piece of glass and severs some guy's head. And I'll give the film this as well. It has some brutal kills, and they are done practically. And I think the effects by Wayne Toff are really good. I will give Wayne Toff a lot of credit for his practical makeup effects in this movie. This film has a lot of brutal kills, and that's why I don't think it's a total pile of shit, piss, and bile, but it's still a really awful film. But I will give it credit where credit is due for things like that, for the brutal kills. I mean, it's got some of the most brutal kills I've seen in this franchise. But it goes to show you, you can have all the brutal kills you want, and they can be done well with practical effects, and it's not going to mean that it's a good movie. So Michael Myers escapes, and now he's a fucking hobo. Hobo Michael Myers. With, a fucking hoodie and a long, scraggly beard looking like Grizzly Adams. And you're just like, really, Rob Zombie? What the fuck were you smoking when you wrote this screenplay? Because it's some really crazy shit that kills way more brain cells than you need to lose right now. Because you don't have that many left to begin with. So, yeah, Hobo Michael Myers. Laurie Strode is riddled with PTSD. She's just depressed and all kinds of fucked up. And she's living with Annie Brackett and her father, Sheriff Brackett. And that leads to another good thing about this film, Brad Dourif. Brad Dourif is amazing in this film. And so is Danielle Harris. It's just a shame that they're both wasted in such a lame, lackluster, shitty sequel. And you have Loomis, who survived, and because he survived, now he's an asshole with a capital A, who's an egotistical prick, who is all about being famous and making money off of his book. And he does the really shitty thing by revealing the true identity of Laurie through his book. And she finds out who she is when she buys the book and reads it. And she's in the car and she's just absolutely upset. And that's another thing I'll give Rob Zombie credit for. You really do sympathize with Laurie Strode when it comes to her plight here, when it comes to what she's been through and how she is made aware of her identity in such a shitty fashion because Loomis is such an ego hungry piece of shit in his own right. And yeah, he's abusive. He's abusive to his aide. There's even a scene where he's like, if I want your opinion, I will beat it out of you. You're like, dude, like, fuck off. He makes Loomis in part 5 look like a fucking saint in comparison. That's how much of an asshole he is in this movie. It doesn't make any sense either. Like, his portrayal in the previous film, he wasn't this bad. So why all of a sudden is he such a raging dickhole? Is this Rob Zombie's fuck you to Loomis? Because if you do some research and do some digging, it seems like he's not a fan of that character. So maybe this is his fuck you to the character of Loomis. And if that's the case, fuck you, Rob Zombie. Especially since Donald Pleasence is no longer around. Why do you have to trample over the man's legacy and one of his most iconic characters? And be a dick about it. So Loomis is an asshole. It makes the sequence in the end when he's trying to sacrifice himself heroically to save Lori have no impact whatsoever because you don't really care whether he lives or dies. You want him to die halfway through the fucking movie because he's such a raging piece of fucking dick cheese. Then you have this art house fuckery that Rob Zombie inserts in the film randomly, where Laurie will have dreams, one of which is black and white, as if it's a Marilyn Manson music video, and there's a 10 to 20 foot tall skeleton in the background with a Michael Myers mask. And you got her mother, who's dressed in white, with a ton of eyeshadow and eyeliner, so much that she looks like a fucking raccoon. And she's got this white horse and young Michael Myers, and they're around this dinner table, and there's people with pumpkin heads. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, what the fuck, Rob Zombie? Seriously, stop smoking so much fucking shit when you're writing your fucking films, because what you wind up with is shit. Yeah, the fucking white horse. Like, when I first saw the white horse scenes in this film, I immediately thought of Richard Pryor's voiceover from the opening of Another You, where he does a voiceover for the TriStar Pictures logo, and he's like, fucking white horse. If Richard Pryor was in this movie and he was just commenting on Rob Zombie's bullshit, this film could have been a classic. Can you imagine that? Richard Pryor just commentating on all of this shit? Be like, fucking white horse, Hobo Michael Myers, sticking his thumb out, asking me for a ride. More like he's gonna stick his thumb up my ass. Bullshit my dick. But no, we are not graced with the presence of Richard Pryor with this film. We're just graced with tons and tons of bullshit and art house fuckery, because that's all it is. It's just art house shots for the sake of being art house that just fuck with the audience and fuck the audience's time. Now, you also have these new characters that are introduced, and Laurie's friends who are just slutty and irritating in their own right. You have Danielle Harris as Annie. One thing I'm going to give Rob Zombie credit for is having her live in the last film. I didn't mention that, and I want to mention that now, but it's ultimately all for naught because he kills her anyway in this movie. And just like large portions of his remake, this film is so fucking boring because you don't give a fuck about anything. The scenes with Loomis, you don't care about because he's an asshole. The sequences with Lori, yeah, you kind of feel for her, but other than that base amount of sympathy, the sequences are pretty flat and dull. The only time the film perks up is when Brad Dourif is there and you see maybe a little bit of brutal violence. But yeah, you're just waiting for Michael Myers to kill somebody. That's essentially what this film is. You're just waiting for Michael Myers to show up and kill someone. And it's usually not worth the wait. Even though there are some intense, brutal kills, like when he curb stomps a guy and a few other death scenes throughout the movie. And then there's dumb shit like Michael Myers, he's wandering through the neighborhood on Halloween night. A kid runs into him because once again, we got to keep doing that shit. So a kid runs into him and then the kid's like, "Are you a giant?" And it's like, "What the fuck is wrong with Rob Zombie? What kid is going to act this way when he runs into a 7 foot tall motherfucker with a dirty, unkempt beard looking like he's a serial killer? Why the fuck would the kid be like, "Hey, what are you doing? Are you a giant?" It's like, what? Are you fucking stupid, Rob Zombie? I think you smoked whatever brain cells you had left when you were writing this script. Fucking come on, man. God. So, if dumb stuff like that, and yeah, just Hobo Michael Myers going around killing people at his mom's strip club, kill some people in a field, because you have this guy who calls him a 7 foot, what is it, a fucktard? I kind of laughed at that because I'm like, kind of is. This movie's a 7 foot tall fucktard. And just talking all kinds of shit to this big guy. And then, of course, Michael Myers kills these motherfuckers. And then Lori figures out who she is. There's this whole dramatic thing. There's this party scene. And she gets drunk. She gets wasted. Her friend gets killed by Michael Myers. She goes home. And that's where you get a really brutal kill where Danielle Harris gets stabbed and is just bleeding everywhere. And it's a good performance by Danielle Harris, but it's wasted because this film sucks so much. And why did she have to die anyway? Why wasn't she the lead? Honestly, I would have preferred this film if Laurie gets killed by Michael Myers early on, and then Danielle Harris's character Annie is the final girl, and she's the one that finally takes out Michael Myers. Instead of this bullshit where Michael Myers is in a shack and he's kidnapped Laurie, and Laurie's having these delusions. She's now seeing the white horse and young Michael, and she's being held back by their ghosts or their spirits or energy or whatever the fuck. There's a helicopter outside. There's flashing lights. Sheriff Brackett shoots Michael Myers with a sniper rifle or a long rifle. And Myers kills Loomis. Laurie walks out of the shack with the Myers mask on. And the film ends with her in an institution, smiling like she's crazy now. And then you have the end credits, which feature the worst remix of the Halloween theme I have ever heard. It is so fucking egregious in so many ways. It's butchered to all hell. It's as if Brian Tyler was asked to butcher John Carpenter's iconic theme with an actual butcher knife. It's all over the place. And then on top of that, you hear what sounds like a woman fingering herself in the background. So while there are crime scene photos of the various different victims from this franchise, from Rob Zombie's Halloween films. So you have these crime scene Polaroids of dead bodies, this shitty remix of the Halloween theme, and then you have what sounds like a woman fingering herself. So crime scene photos. And you're just like, what? So even the end credits suck. I mean, this is one of those films where Rob Zombie was given the ultimate authority to do what he wanted, and he just managed to fuck the audience and fuck the franchise over in a multitude of ways, each worse and each more painful than the last. You have unlikable characters. Even the characters that have potential, like Annie and Sheriff Brackett, they're wasted. Even though there's some really good scenes with them, there's a sequence with Brad Dourif and Malcolm McDowell that is really good. It's a great scene where Brad Dourif just punches Malcolm McDowell and gets pissed at him, and it's a really good scene between two good actors going at one another. Just wish it was in a much better movie. So even the elements of the script and the story and the overall film are wasted and are essentially flushed down the fucking toilet because of Rob Zombie's propensity and addiction to fucking this franchise in the ass. Can't stop giving it anal. Even when it's not giving him permission, like it's telling him to stop, and he's still going to town on the franchise's ass. Anything else? Okay, let's see when it comes to this film. Performances by the cast. Uh, you have some really good bit of casting. You have Margot Kidder, who's in this as the psychiatrist who is doing sessions with Laurie Strode. Scout Taylor-Compton, if I could say her name, Scout Taylor-Compton. I thought she was better here than she was in the remake, but that's not saying much because she's ultimately still a really limited actress. She's definitely a lot more tolerable here in the theatrical cut than she is in the director's cut. Because the scenes where she's supposed to be angry come across as totally inauthentic and sound like she's doing a stand-up routine. Howard Hessman is in it in a brief role here. Brad Dourif, like I said. Sheri Moon Zombie's back as Michael's mom. Tyler Mane, of course, returns as Michael Myers. That's another thing in the director's cut. Michael was supposed to speak. He does. There's a scene where Michael Myers speaks and he says die and he stabs Loomis. Just like I want this film to die and this franchise to die. Michael Myers almost speaks in the theatrical cut too, because he's constantly grunting all the time, like he's Tim the Toolman Taylor. More power. Fuck this movie, man. It even has Weird Al Yankovic in it. I love Weird Al, but he can't save this. And he sticks out so much. Why the fuck is Weird Al in this movie? Like, when I first saw that scene, there was like a talk show hosted by Chris Hardwick, and they had Loomis as a guest, and Weird Al Yankovic was there. I'm like, am I watching a fucking parody? Am I watching a satire of the Halloween films? I'm not. This is just, this is meant to be a somewhat serious sequel, and Weird Al is suddenly on my screen. What the fuck, Rob Zombie? And the other technical aspects of the film aren't really that impressive. I don't like the score by Tyler Bates. I think it's one of his worst scores. It's not very memorable. He does an absolute fuck up and just cock up job on the Halloween theme in the end credits. The cinematography by Brandon Trost, really dark, dingy, and bland looking for the most part, except for sequences like during the Halloween party and some of the stuff in the hospital. The editing, there are a lot of moments where the editing by Glenn Garland, it's just obnoxious and irritating and bad because of the quick cuts and the flashes and all this other headache inducing shit. Um and for a film that only is like an hour and 40 something minutes, at least a theatrical cut, it definitely feels like it's a lot longer than that when it's just you're just not invested in anything. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 other than it's got some potentially interesting ideas, but none of them are fully fleshed out. None of them live up to their full potential. They're all wasted. They all wind up in the sewer, covered in piss and shit, just like everything else in this movie. And yeah, it's family is forever, more like failure is forever. Because this movie will forever be a failure.